All right. So now we can begin the meeting with Don Knorr, Robert Burke, Carl Stump, and Susan West present.
All right, it's 6:31. Call a meeting of the Public Works Committee for the City of Middleton to order. Agenda item number 1 is the minutes of the 2/14/2022 meeting. Any comments?
No.
I would move approval. I beat you to it, Robert.
You certainly did. I would be happy to second your motion.
Okay, any further discussion?
Well,
Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2, Bell Farm TIA scope of work. Want to take that, Sean?
Sure. For brief introduction, the consultant that we work with for traffic impact analyses put together a proposal, and that's in the packet we can jump to. But also, they put together a map of intersections within a mile of the site, which is for a large generator such as this. And by large, we mean 500 peak hour trips. Our TIA guidelines suggest a mile radius of, it just says intersections, but I'm certain it means major intersections. And then our consultant helped whittle down particular intersections that didn't seem very major and or weren't likely to be affected by this development, even though they're within a mile. So in fact, let me jump to the map.
yeah.
I think that's really helpful. Beyond all the words. Oops, gone too far. There we are. Is that showing up okay on screens?
Yes.
Okay, and I can zoom in, but in a general sense, I'll highlight that along Airport Road, once we get past the belt line, they're suggesting that the largely residential development up here is not likely to go out west into Airport Road or come from there very much. And then there are a handful of intersections along High Road that are probably better represented by the ones that don't have little red X's through them. Up at Greenbrier and at Bellefontaine Boulevard and Spring Hill and right by the elementary school, and then down at Century Avenue would still be in the traffic impact analysis, but several of the others in between there would not be.
Sean, I'd like to add back 1 or 2. Number 26 at Frank Lloyd Wright, because that, for all of us that live in the northern or eastern, whatever direction it is, half of Middleton Hills, there's a tremendous number of us that come out on Frank Lloyd Wright instead of going down through Frank Lloyd Wright and Century.
Okay.
And I was sort of wondering the same thing about 25 for the people west of High Road in all of that area.
Is that, so 25 on this map is
Friendship.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
26 is Frank Lloyd Wright, 25 is Friendship.
Just zoom in here a little for us all. So Frank Lloyd Wright is 25, but Friendship, you're thinking is 24?
No, 26 is Frank Lloyd Wright.
Not according to the map.
This list says 26 is Apprentice Place.
No, that list is off. The first,
Maybe their graphics don't line up. Just
their graphics aren't lining up.
These
There
circles are
isn't
kind
one
of
at
big.
Apprentice. There's one at Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay, so we'll just use names instead. So
Prentice
you-
is Skip. And
You
then
want Frank
Friendship.
Lloyd? You want Frank
I
Lloyd
want
Wright?
Frank
and
Lloyd Wright and
Friendship?
Friendship.
You want Frank Lloyd Wright in,
Yes.
and you want Friendship in
No, I'm sorry, not Friendship, Apprentice.
Apprentice.
Or is it? Don, you know these streets better than I do.
Oh, Apprentice doesn't cross the road. 'Cause that's the
Right,
one
it's Friendship that it crosses the road.
maybe
Friendship?
they kept Harmony in because the school's there. That's a good thing. I would think with Harmony and Frank Lloyd Wright, we'd be in pretty good shape, Susan.
Yeah, I'm thinking for, yeah, Harmony and Frank Lloyd Wright for Middleton Hills, but I'm thinking Friendship for what's west of High Road. If they're coming down and go down High Road to go east on Century.
So that would be a right turn to get to Century?
Be a left
Yeah.
turn. Yeah, right turn to get to Century and then left turn from Century, from High Road to Century.
Yeah, and so Century and High is in, so we'll be able
Yeah.
to figure that out easily enough.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't ordinarily be too concerned with right turns.
Yeah, that would be a right
Okay.
turn.
Right turn, I could see, yeah, we don't need to worry about, but definitely Frank Lloyd Wright needs to be in.
Okay.
Well, the proposal includes Frank Lloyd Wright.
Well, it does, but it's recommending taking it out to simplify some of the study of this corridor. So everything with a red X is being recommended for removal, and Susan is suggesting, no, let's leave Frank Lloyd Wright in. So instead of removing 7, we would remove 6, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
So I did have a question about the yellow highlighted
Yeah.
ones.
Okay.
Are those being duplicated by the study by Bruce Company? And I couldn't tell from this list if they were going to be studied again here, or if those are also like listed as ones that we're not going to study in this TIA, because another TIA is already
It actually
being
does get a
performed.
little bit convoluted because of timing. So we won't have to do counts or forecast twice, but it is in both. And each of them is considering the other to be background traffic and then adding in the Bruce Company one, it'll add in Bruce Company as development traffic. Like, what's the incremental difference of this development? But then from the Bell Farm TIA, it'll look at Bruce Company as if it's background traffic, and then add in for the incremental difference, the Bell Farm traffic. Because this is all about trying to assess what's the difference to the transportation system of a development. And it's a little unusual where we're doing 2 pretty significant developments on effectively the same corridor. So there's a recognition that there's a little less work involved, but the modeling and analysis is sort of complementary.
And I guess I get that. Do you happen to know whether the engineering firm that does the TIA gives these developers a little bit of a break, since they're basically doing the job twice with the same modeling in just a few different variables? Do at least the developers get a little bit of a break on price for things that basically these engineers were going to be working on anyway?
I don't have any way to know it, but we did talk about that, that they don't have to count this again. They don't have to forecast this again. It's going to be done either way. So
Sure.
they said that there is some price break, but I have no way to know that. It's just an hours of effort kind of thing. So
Got it.
I don't have a good way to document that.
Okay. Thank you.
So far we've got adding it back in, or accepting the reduction of those intersections, but adding back in Frank Lloyd Wright. Is that the way I understand it?
That's the
Correct.
note I wrote.
I'm happy with that.
I am too.
So, given that, does somebody want to make a motion to that effect?
Could I just ask a question? This is Kathleen, the developer. Was anybody else, and maybe it's just me, but was anybody else surprised by the price tag? I mean, and first of all, I'm so grateful that, Sean, I don't know if it was you that worked with them in terms of removing, some of these that maybe, didn't make as much sense, because if that helped, I think you mentioned like a possible $10,000 savings. But I was floored by this price. And again, from that scope of even like just layering this on to the cost of housing for people, like I'm trying to like wrap my brain around it all. And so is this the norm? And if it is, it is. But I just really am trying to understand, like,
It's a great
correct.
question, and I appreciate that. We haven't had a lot of this scale of development, so since we had the TIA guidelines anyhow, kind of what started it was the community of Bishops Bay up on Highway Q. But back then we were using a different system where the developer hired a traffic engineer to produce a report, and then the developer hired the city's traffic engineer to review the report. So each developer was effectively paying twice, once to produce something and then the other time to review it. So we went to this other system instead. And what I compared this one to was the Bruce Company TIA, which is underway.
Mhm.
And it has a few fewer intersections, but they're more significant intersections. And it has a cost in this same ballpark. That one's just over $60,000, and we trimmed its scope back a little bit too from the guidelines.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the ways that we can actually create housing that people can afford and do all the right things we're trying to do, sustain it from a sustainability standpoint. And if it, like I said, it is what it is. If that is the cost, I just wanted to notate that all of this stuff adds up.
Now, Sean, the way I was reading the proposal, this is an hourly not to exceed proposal, so they only charge what they're actually putting into it.
Right, yeah. I mean, they've had a track record actually of typically going over, but they can only bill up to the maximum amount. And on something of this scale, I don't know how accurate their hour estimate is going to be, but it is limiting. You're right. So it's hourly up to.
Okay.
Sean, is the price going to go down with deleting these intersections?
Yeah, so they gave me a price of they'd knock off 10 grand if we took out 7. I'll talk to them about what does it mean to take out 6 instead, but it should be
Okay.
commensurate with that.
Okay, still waiting on a motion.
I will make the motion of approving it with deleting, or at least keeping 26 in. Is that what we said earlier, Sean?
Well, Frank Lloyd Wright, I'll say.
Yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright.
In fact, I think the way I'll list it in a minute is the 6 intersections to be eliminated just to avoid confusion.
Okay.
And this is Robert. I'd second the motion. And just to answer Kathleen's question, unfortunately, this is not too unreasonable from what I've seen in the past. Engineering does cost money. And as an engineer, I welcome the fact that engineering does garner a price, but yeah, unfortunately, it means that somebody has to pay that. So I think this is in the ballpark.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, Bell Farm preliminary road design. Sean, I'll let you go through this one as well.
Spare you the gory details of the lengthy memo because Bruce gave us some nice pictures instead. And that's always better. So in fact, let me just go to kind of full pages here so I can click back and forth a bit. Last time when we talked, the committee gave some guidance. Well, show us what 450-foot radii would look like on this street. And so in this big blue line, which we also looked at as a committee briefly at the last meeting, this is what 450-foot center line radii would look like as is in our ordinance. In option B, it introduces, and let me go back and forth a little bit. You'll see mostly when I flip back and forth that this curve pulls down a little bit, but only a little bit.
Not much.
And that one was, I think, a 350-foot radius instead of 450 foot.
300
sorry.
according,
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, 300.
450 and 300.
Yeah. So it drops it down in radius quite a bit, but doesn't move it a whole lot.
Right.
And then in option C would have a couple of sharper radii, and then in option D was pretty much where we started, which was several that had 250-foot centerline radius. So for comparison, I can pretty handily go back and forth since Bruce did a nice job laying these out. My recommendation, and you saw my thought process in the memo, was to stick with the 450-foot here. In large part, that was based on the ordinance and based on just the overall regional context for the road. I understand this neighborhood is being looked at separately, but I'm looking at Misty Valley and I'm looking at the Acre Farm and I'm looking over towards Balzer Road and thinking most of that is traditional kind of straight line, broad sweeping curve collector roads for moving people between Parmenter Street and Highway Q. And this neighborhood, I can understand the reasoning for wanting to introduce a more serpentine alignment with hills, but it is notably different than what else is going on this road.
Sure. I honestly couldn't see much difference between A, B, and C. D, definitely I could see the difference. But I mean, I know there's a little bit, I mean, I saw the numbers are different, but in terms of the road doesn't really change its path all that drastically between A and B is definitely not much. Between B and C a little bit more, but still not much. By the time you go all the way down to D, which has radii of around 250 in certain areas, I think it was more visible what was going on. But given that there's, in my mind, there doesn't seem to be much difference between A, B, and C, it really comes down to a question of, do we want A or do we want D? I don't know that giving you B or C gives anybody too much of what they might want. Maybe I'm wrong. And with what's not shown well here is the hills, the vertical displacement. So I'm leaning toward A.
Robert, I can go with A. It's still, it's not a straight shoot down there, which is what I was opposed to.
Sure. Yeah, it's
And
got the curves, but it's defendable of why we allowed 450 because that follows guidelines that we know about. And, and I'm a little leery of going to D just because if it was only changing, these curves on a horizontal plane, that would be one thing. But I think the fact that it's also going up and down kind of some hilly areas a little bit might change the way this drives quite a bit. And I
Yeah.
think it's safer to stick with A, and then you get some slowdown, and just from the fact that you can't see as well ahead of you if you're cresting a hill.
Right. So I'm fine with A. I would make that motion.
And I guess I would second it, but does anybody have any other thoughts?
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
muted. I was wondering if I could jump in for a minute.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not the chair.
Don will let you know.
You're fine.
Okay. So the goal was to, obviously show kind of the impact that these different radii have on the project. But one thing to keep in mind is the character of that street. It's kind of that in between street between collector and local, based on the MPO's guidelines that they came out with. And what and as we stated before in previous meetings, we're trying to not only bring the traffic through, but making it sort of a natural way to slow down as a traffic calming measure as you come east into the development. And then in addition, for people coming from Parmenter, coming from the west, heading to the east, we're trying to keep them from just taking off once they get past beyond the Serenbe intersection. We want them to be deliberate about driving through there, and then it transitions out to Misty Valley the way it is now. I spent some time today looking through some of the area communities and some of their design guidelines that are in their land division ordinances. And I had just emailed you, Sean, a little chart that I put together, just kind of outlining or listing the different communities: the city of Madison, city of Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, McFarland, Oregon, and Wanakee. And so what I was able to find is that McFarland and Oregon collector radii were 200 feet. Sun Prairie and Fitchburg were 250 feet foot centerline for the collector streets. And the city of Madison and the village of Wanakee were 300 for the collectors. So it gave me a sense of, that there were other communities that are still referring to these streets as collectors, but allowing less of a radius. And in the city of Madison, the 300-foot collector radii was for a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is similar to what we have here. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was the actual in the option D, the one that we're trying to maintain. The actual curves themselves, the length of those curves aren't very long to begin with. So if I start at the first one coming out of Misty Valley, the actual curve itself is just 160 feet. And then I've got a 100-foot tangent section. And then the next curve is the actual curve itself. You curve for 87 feet. And then the one that's kind of looped down there, the next one is 140 feet before you get into your 450-foot curve. And you brought up the idea of, or the consideration of the terrain as well. And because of how hilly that is out there and the way we're traversing that, we're kind of trying to kind of hug the contours a little as best I can to kind of minimize the grading that we're going to need to do out here. So, I think I think with all that kind of, outline, that was kind of my sort of argument or reasoning behind why we're hoping to stick with something similar to this. Because I'm afraid I just get concerned that because none of these buildings are we are allowing parking on both sides of Bellefontaine, but there are no driveways onto Bellefontaine. So I get the sense that if this were to be a 450-foot curved road, it's gonna invite people just to kind of fly through there, or not fly, but the speeds to me are gonna be more than we feel that we're comfortable with, but through the neighborhood. So.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, I would like to just clarify. I know, Bruce, you mentioned some degree of confusion as to what the classification is, but it's collector urban. But it's not both or a hybrid of local and collector. It's just collector, and it's intended to carry neighborhood traffic east-west. So I understand and appreciate what you're trying to do in this piece of it by introducing some steering effort and navigation of hills. And while I appreciate that, I'm also trying to temper it just a little.
Sean, I have a question. Since it's going to stop at Pheasant Branch and not go between Pheasant Branch and Balzer, but would that change its rating as being a collector road?
No, it's going to have a different alignment, but we're still intending to get it over to, well, at least Highway Q, and then
Right.
probably
Yeah,
at some
'cause it
point
would-
improve Onken Road to become part of this thing.
I guess
So
what I'm saying is it's going to hit Pheasant Branch, go left, and then you'll do the sharp right turn at Balzer.
Well, and as you know, there's a push by the city to minimize the amount of traffic added to Pheasant Branch Road. So the goal is to get across Pheasant Branch Road, but not on Pheasant Branch Road.
What you're taking it through is county land for Pheasant Branch Conservancy. And I don't think
Yes.
they're going to let you go through there.
Right. So this is an older map and it's being revised by the planning staff. We're currently talking with the Acre family about how do we get
Yeah.
through their subdivision with this road.
Mhm.
And the likely solution is to get up to Balzer Road and cross Pheasant Branch there.
Yeah.
So again, this is just broad brush regional context kind of stuff, but not pinned down alignment. In fact, while we did build this piece on that alignment, we're not proposing to build this piece on that alignment.
Sean, on the cross section for the residential collector, one of the bullet points, and that takes people up to 10,000 vehicles per day. So 1 to 10,000 vehicles per day. One of the third bullet point down says construct with traffic calming slow points. And so how are we doing that here if we just continue to, we widened it last time and then we're flattening it out? It seems like we're moving in the opposite direction of that. So
yeah, I'm never really sure exactly what was envisioned by that. I didn't write it. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, because generally for emergency service routes, and I expect most collector roads are emergency service routes, it's not like we want to put speed humps or stuff in there. We want to make it fairly easy for fire trucks to get where they're going. So it's a great question, but I don't know what that meant in terms of application.
And it very specifically, though, refers to collector streets in Middleton.
Right, yep.
So when we designed it, this street originally, you know, obviously we were trying to take all the aspects that, again, the direction the city says it wants to go and apply that here. And yeah, I would hate to see this get flattened out and just, again, when you see what's happening in Madison and what efforts they're going to try to introduce traffic calming measures on like East Washington and stuff, I just don't know why we would. Because I think we can still get traffic, carry the volume of traffic and carry it safely and still introduce a little bit of traffic calming. And what's going to be, hopefully this is going to be a gem, like not for us, but for the city of Middleton. And we're trying to like keep it feeling like that. And, you know, while keeping it safe and while achieving the regional goals.
And I don't discount that there are more than one answer as to how best to balance the competing interests here. I mean, people want to get to and from the Beltline to their neighborhood. And nobody wants anyone going fast through their neighborhood. I get that.
Yeah.
I don't know the best way to do that and make it safe. There's, as Bruce mentioned, there's a lot of steering effort going on with a very curvy road, and then we're adding hills into it.
I don't know that
and
that's.
I get why we're doing that.
Well,
It's a lot.
my point was that it wasn't it was to point out that the curves that are there are fairly short. So your steering motion is not, you know, you're not cranking and cranking back and forth. You're just kind of, as you're driving through, you're just kind of gliding down the road. So,
Well, I think that describes option A better than option D, though. I think in option D, you're saying turn left, and very shortly after that, turn right.
Mhm. Yeah, and that I'm not discounting that, but what I'm saying is you can still have those little smaller curves or shorter distance curves, and still travel safely, and with option D.
Why would the other, Sean, you might know this better than maybe anybody, but why would the other neighboring municipalities have different situations for their collector roads? Are there different definitions of collector? I'm just trying to wrap my head around why this is 450 here, but not in the surrounding areas.
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I don't know how different municipalities set their desired cross sections or geometrics of that. I'm not saying that a 300-foot curve isn't navigable. In fact, as I mentioned in the memo, we've got one on Pheasant Branch Road, right near the bottom of the hill as it's turning by Middleton Glen. I get frequent calls of concern about it, but we do have that.
Sean, you get calls about that because people are going down that straight area too fast.
Well, the calls I get are about that curve.
Yeah.
Like we got to get parked cars off the street because they're afraid that they're going to drive into them.
Okay. But they don't have a problem with the curve. I've forgotten the name of the person. That sharper curve further up where it's just a sharp curve.
Further west on Pheasant Branch
Yeah.
by the stop sign. I think
This is just at a house. There's a sharper curve.
I don't know which one.
Before you get to Gaylord Nelson.
Go further north. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do get calls of concern there too. Yeah.
The big problem is pedestrians walking on the side of the road at that point.
Yeah.
Which shouldn't be a problem here because of
You've got
sidewalks.
sidewalks
Right.
and parked
Mhm.
cars.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't have a problem going to the smaller radii. It's just that the engineers last time didn't like that idea,
Yeah, I'm still,
not the ordinance.
I'm still concerned about the sharper radii, and I understand 100% what the developer wants and the reasons why. But
Sean,
this
what are
is a
the,
collector, not
yeah,
not something in, just a residential side street or something.
what are the radii in Middleton Hills on Frank Lloyd Wright where it becomes Frank Lloyd Wright and Glacier Ridge?
Oh, I was just trying to get some examples of collector streets. So
Yeah, but I
don't
mean,
know.
how sharp of an angle is that? Just so I can vision it.
I don't know. I didn't measure that. I was just looking at collectors.
Okay. Don, do you have any idea?
So that- if I- So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any interest from Susan or Robert to change it at this point?
Not for me.
I could change it to B easily.
Robert?
I'll ask the developer if that even gives, if, I mean, they showed B because we asked them to show a few different varieties. Does going from A to B give you anything that you find desirable? Or is the only real option you wanted was D, and if you can't have D, B's not going to make you any happier than A?
Well, we want D.
I-
But we want D, but like, and I guess I'll let Bruce answer this. We want D, but I think B is definitely better than A. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah. It is.
Okay, well, if I know this goes a little bit against the books that we have, I would be willing to go with B. So if Susan, if you're changing your motion,
Yeah.
I would change
I'm
mine.
gonna change it to B.
Okay, I second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second for B. Any further discussion?
Do you have any comments on it, Don?
I'm a lover of curvilinear and traffic calming, no matter what we can do with it. So, even A looked to me like it's going to be traffic calming, especially if you've got parked cars on both sides of the road.
Which you probably won't
It's going to
really.
really squelch traffic. What I'm trying to put down
Yeah.
is, are people going to park on the street and walk into these homes? Are those the front doors that we see? The garages are in the back, but is there going to be a movement to have people park in the front and go into those homes?
I don't think we're gonna have as much parking on the street as we have in the retail part of Middleton Hills on Frank Lloyd Wright.
That's my guess too, is that I'm glad that there's parking available on the street. I don't think it will be heavily utilized.
So the parking's not gonna do the traffic calming.
Right.
The two elders have spoken, going towards the designer and developer.
Sure. So again, motion and second. If other people have different viewpoints, love to hear them.
And I think it might be procedurally, we don't do this a lot, but I think it might be good to include a referral in support of the Common Council waiving the ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for these then.
I would be fine with that.
That's fine. Yeah. All right. Shall we call a question?
Sure.
Yeah,
All right. With no further discussion, all in favor of the motion for B, with the note that it does deviate from the Middleton standard slightly.
Yep.
Signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Well, Kathleen and Bruce, I know it's not what you had hoped for, but hopefully it gives you a
A little bit.
little more wiggle room there.
Thank you for your time,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you.
So next up, we have a resolution for the easement for MG&E.
Easement from MG&E.
Yep, through the golf course.
And
The Pleasant View Golf
And-
Course has already talked about that. The Common Council already talked about that in December, and now this is the easement that resulted from that. What it effectively will do, I can, oops, if I can get to the diagram here. There we go. No, almost. Well, it'll get from Black Hawk Road up to a pump station in the golf course. And what'll happen is as ATC is moving their poles along Pleasant View Road, it provides an alternate source to feed the subdivisions and the golf course maintenance building during that relocation of electric lines. So without this, they couldn't do that.
And I mean,
okay.
to me, this is a no-brainer unless you see something I don't, Sean. So I would make a motion to recommend this to council, who I think already
Mhm.
they have seen this. Maybe
I will second it. And Sean, I have a question and it's not related to this. When we redo the road, are we going to have power poles going along the side, those great big tall ones?
Yes, yep.
Are they gonna have to move those?
Well, they need to move them over a little bit to the west, but not very far, which was
Okay.
a big part of the goal, which is why they needed this easement, because they can't work on the new poles being close to the existing overhead wires. So it was either move them 5 feet and find an alternate route for power to the subdivisions, or move them 30 feet and then they don't have to worry about this easement. But we didn't want the option that moved it like 30 feet.
No.
Okay. No, I'm just curious, since I drive by there frequently.
And I think
With
they're wood
power
poles
poles, yeah.
now, mostly wood poles now, and they're going to become steel poles, is my understanding.
Okay.
So on this one, we need a
MG&E.
motion to approve it to Common Council.
Yep.
So we had a motion and a second from Robert and Susan.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No,
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is amendment number 2 for Middleton or Mendota Beach Road.
Yes.
Middleton Road, sorry, reconstruction.
Yeah. So Dan Perry, who's on the call tonight in case there are questions, prepared an amendment for construction phase services. And oops, Sean Ellsworth looked it over. It's driving me crazy.
Hmm.
That didn't help me. Didn't help you.
A little bit.
So Sean Ellsworth looked in detail with Dan at some of the hours, but then Dan provided too a cost breakdown of the funding source internally of where those hours come from, be they general fund, water utility, and sewer utility, because it's a pretty major project. I'm going to zoom in on that just a bit too, to give us an overall feel for kind of how the overall project is looking. Now I have to decrease that a bit. Okay. So we just wanted to be able to confirm that between what's budgeted in various funding sources and what's locked up in construction costs, because we've already awarded the bid. And we looked also at amendment number 1, which was just that 4,400 design issue about the sanitary sewer that's coming out of sewer utility. So Dan provided this breakdown between other funding sources just to verify that we do have adequate funding in all of our sources to do this. So the recommendations in favor of this amendment as proposed.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and the price seems like what I would expect for this kind of work. So I make a motion to recommend approval of this to the council.
This is Carl, I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Well, and I say to the council, and I meant to council and finance.
And it's on their agendas for tomorrow.
Great.
Okay,
Oh, good thing we're acting on it tonight then.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Oh, motion carries. And 2 more items. Concrete repair project, award of bid 22-101.
Yeah.
So same amount of money, a little less work to get out of that money, right?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. Prices went up dramatically for flat work this year. Normally we've been paying $8.50 a square foot, and so we estimated that we'll catch a spike at some point here and estimated 10, but it was $14.35,
Wow.
which I've never seen anywhere for something like this
That's per square foot. Wow.
per square foot. Yeah,
It's like almost double, well, getting close to double where we were
yeah.
yeah.
at
It's,
850 or whatever.
it's
Why is this happening?
we noticed a pretty big price jump after the recession in 2008, 2009. Lots of smaller concrete flatwork contractors just left the business and they never came back. So part of it is that there's a shortage of people doing this work. But as other site improvement and general contractors are calling for concrete workers, I don't know if they're paying just really attractive pricing or being super flexible with something else. But I think that's still part of what we're seeing is those prices went up and they haven't really come down. Now, I don't know why they went this much higher in 1 year.
After 2008, did they eventually come back down, or did they like go up and then just plateau and stay there?
Yeah, sort of the latter. They
Yikes.
they went from like $4 to,
8 something.
6, 7, lately 8. And it's, I mean, that was sort of the plateau. So I don't know if this is a look into the future or if this is a weird spike. But that was the big number that really got us.
And is this primarily the labor side of it, or is it also a big portion of, did the material costs go up for everybody?
We haven't seen a huge jump in ready mix concrete or steel. It's up, but not of this magnitude. So it's got to be in the labor side.
Last question from me is, if we're holding the price the same and we're getting a lot less for the money, can we afford to do that much less concrete work in the city this year? Or are we really going to say, 6 months from now, doggone it, we just really need to pour more money into this because we need the work done? Do you have any way to estimate whether a 30-some% reduction in amount of concrete work is going to be something we can live with in 2022?
I think for me, that's actually the first question is, does it tone back down at some point?
Sure.
And it might take us a couple years just to get a flavor for that. Because when it all comes down to it, our goal is to cover about 1/8 of the city in any given year. Could we go to 1/9 of the city or 1/10 of the city and still call it an effective concrete maintenance program? Probably. It's not like the number 8 is magic. It's what we had settled on long ago as being meaningful coverage. And this really all comes back to, since we have a policy and we have federal guidelines about what it means to maintain sidewalks, before the federal government starts getting involved from an ADA perspective and saying, yeah, you're not really taking care of things. That's when you get pretty significant judgments.
Right.
Well, Sean, I'm seeing where you need, since this has already been budgeted for this year, Robert and I probably need to do this when it comes before council tomorrow night. Explain that we're probably going to have to increase our capital borrowing so that we can meet our goals
Oh, it's worse. This is in the operating budget.
for next.
Yeah.
Oh, this
that's
isn't
the-
operating?
Let me give you the bad
Oh, we don't
news.
have a chance.
Not
Ouch.
capital.
I was thinking maybe this needs to go into capital.
It has been back and forth over the years. I think the push was to get it back into operating largely because it's an annual maintenance program.
Right.
And secondarily, because the revenue stream is going into the operating budget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but I
it
have
is.
a feeling we're going to
it's-
have to discuss it for capital.
Yeah, we definitely, I think we need to inform our fellow alder persons what
Yeah,
we're seeing. So let's try to remember to talk about this tomorrow, but I guess, have you heard a motion yet, Sean?
No, I have not.
I would make a motion to recommend to the finance committee and the common council this award of construction contract in not to exceed $108,202.
I will second that. We don't have a choice. There is no money in operating
Right.
unless we want to let some staff go.
Well, that's not really an
It's
option
not-
either.
I don't know, depending on the day, you might get a volunteer.
That's true.
Yeah, but we can't afford to replace those people either, so.
Yeah, this year we're just pinched, I think. I know the mayor brought it up too, can we find some way to just fund it anyway? And in the operating budget, I've seen the operating budget. I don't see it.
No.
It's not there.
Okay, so the motion now is to limit sidewalk replacement to $108,000. Is that correct?
That's
Yeah, it's
correct.
basically keeping the dollar amount the same, but limiting the work to hit that budget.
Mhm.
Yeah, actually, that's what I said, to $108,000. So any further discussion on that? Our city engineer is going to have a hard time keeping track of that.
We won't use as much
You'll have
paint
to go
this
out and
year.
pick. Yeah. So. All right, with no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? No opposed, motion carries. That does go to council and finance, correct, Sean?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, all right.
And that's on tomorrow too, just assuming we would have something to say about it. I figured if nothing else, we could always pull it quick from those agendas.
Okay.
And then our last agenda item is about Shorecrest
So
neighborhood.
resurfacing.
Finally, we'll resurface those roads. And these bid prices came in great.
Yep.
Well, at least the bottom line of these prices came in great.
Sure.
Not to mention they were all clustered together, so you knew everybody was pretty much bidding the same thing.
Yeah, that was really nice to see. It's frankly been unusual.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was good too.
Motion to recommend to Finance and Common Council award of the contract to Payne and Dolan in the amount not to exceed as listed there on the screen.
All right.
Need a second?
This is Carl, I'll second.
Hey, motion by Robert, second by Carl. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Well, there's only one item left, and that would be adjournment.
I will move adjournment.
Okay, did I hear a second? I didn't. hear it.
Lack of second.
I just enjoy your company too much.
Oh, sure, because I won't be here in 2 weeks, so that's.
Sure, I'll second.
All right. Was that I'm gonna say, was that a backhanded second, Robert? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you. And Don, are you going someplace